What I have for you now is one of the most wild 3 minutes and 18 seconds of television that I've seen in a very long time. I can tell you that. An individual, Jason Whitlock, appeared on Tucker Carlson's show on Fox News to call for secession. Not Marjorie Greene's confused, incoherent national divorce, but it's all peaceful and we're actually still under one federal government, but we're two separate parts of the... Okay, not that. Full on secession. And at the end of the clip, you'll hear him say, any means. I'm sure he would clarify that later if he got pressed. And no, I'm not. But by any means, secession. We know how that works out. And you'll hear his unhinged explanation for why that is. And he'll start with the indictment of Trump. That's what he's responding to. Brought him, and this part is perfectly fine, as we say often on the show. He talks about going to the Bible in response, I guess, to Trump's indictment. But then whatever his interpretation was during that process, for some reason brings him to this conclusion, and it is wild. So get ready. Again, the beginning, just hold, let him kind of set up, and then boom, it goes absolutely wild. Take a look.
So what did you think of yesterday?
Tucker, it took me to the Bible, quite honestly. All times are biblical, but man, this really seems like we're in some end times here. And it really took me to 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 14 through 18. Verse 14, the Bible talks about you can't have partnership. The righteous can't have partnership with the lawless. And that's not me calling Trump the most righteous person in the world, but anybody looking at this knows that...
But he's close to it.
Alvin Bragg and the Democratic and the leftists are lawless. They don't believe in fair justice, equal treatment under the law. They don't believe in that. And so you can't have partnership.
No, it's because we believe in equal treatment under the law that we think Trump should be held accountable for his legal violation, criminal possibly violations, even though he's a former president. No one should be above the law. That's why we think this process should play itself out. The system should do what it's supposed to.
With him. And then if you go down to verse 17, Paul talks about God's instruction that you got to come out from among them and separate. That's what God instructed. And that's where I think we actually are, Tucker, is these guys are so far removed from the truth, so far removed from any of the...
Just to be clear, he's talking about the left right now, okay?
...values that made this country great. We can't really have partnership with them. And my mindset went to secession, that we have to separate. We have to come out from among them. They're so...
And you saw that Tucker nodded when he said secession.
Unrighteous. They're so unclean that, finding common ground is impossible with people who think men can become women, who
You could have put money down. That's where he was going. We needed to secede because they believe men can become women. Logic.
Told us, hey, look, we just want two men to be able to get married, and there's no slippery slope. And that was a lie. And we've seen the slippery slope. Now it's drag queens reading books to kids. Now it's taking kids to drag queen shows. Now it's...
Just don't take the kid to the show if you don't want the kid to be at the show. It's fine.
Mutilating kids and infecting them with gender dysphoria and using it as an excuse to cut off their breast or cut off their penis. You can't have peace. You can't...
Yes, I'm also confused.
...have partnership with these people. There are so many lies stacked on top of lies, from the whole Black Lives Matter, George Floyd deal, and the police are just out indiscriminately killing black men and it's so dangerous because of the police. That's all a lie and everybody knows it. We can't find common ground with people who have no respect for the truth, no respect for justice, no respect for fairness. we have to think about going our separate ways. And whether that's through secession or whether that's through some sort of national divorce, it has to be on the table, because you just can't find common ground with people this delusional, who think that they're God and they can make up the rules. And so I don't see a pathway forward for those of us that respect America's founding, have traditional values, have a faith in God. We got to separate. And I don't care how it's done, but I just don't see a way to coexist with people this far removed from truth.
He says, I don't care how it's done, and then continues with this sentence. So he mentioned George Floyd, and then aside from that, it was all drag queens and trans youth, I guess, that he was mad about. Why, just quickly, why is it that those who seem to obsess the most with and talk the most about trans youth have the least the least amount of knowledge about what is and isn't happening, what the conversation even is when it comes to that subject? It's rather strange and concerning. But I guess because of that he's all up confused about, we need a secession. That's the justification. And it's what we've been talking about so much recently. It's creating a boogeyman that really doesn't exist of the left, and using that to justify your own horrible radical actions with the ideology that you are holding, right? And it's also what we've been going over, which is distraction politics, because there just aren't policy proposals coming forward from, for the most part, never want to overgeneralize, but the part of the right that is driving kind of the agenda right now. There just isn't policy coming from this group, this movement, to improve the lives of people. And the political leaders, whether it be a political influencer, I guess you might call someone like him, who advocates for certain political policies, or should be, or a politician themselves, we're just not seeing from the Republican Party, specifically the far right within it, and those that advocate on its behalf, actual solutions being put forward to the issues of today. And so instead, it's talking about this boogeyman they've created, again, with very little to zero understanding about what they're even talking about. And I must note every single time we get on this, I think because of the value and the care that all decent people and most people have for the younger generation, younger people, children, wanting to protect them. Because of that, it sounds more justified to say that you want to do really radical things because of the bad things that are being done to children, right? When we hear something horrible being done to children, we are more motivated to do something that otherwise maybe we wouldn't, because of that protection instinct for children. And so we can't let them get away with mischaracterizing the reality right now when it comes specifically to political advocacy and that effect on children, as we've mentioned so many on the left multiple times, and definitely on this show. If you actually care, and what's motivating your political ideology right now to the point where you're calling for secession about the children, it seems profoundly logical to me to start with the leading cause of death for children. That makes sense to me. If we're gonna have a conversation about protecting the kids, which I think we should have, let's start with the leading cause of death for kids. The thing that is harming kids so much in the United States, which is firearm-related deaths, which is gun violence. And one of the ways we know we can decrease the amount of children who are dying at the hands of guns is to more properly regulate, as every other developed country does, and as we see work in the United States when states do it, the actual firearm itself, to more properly regulate the gun. But Jason Whitlock and those within his political movement who are pretending to want secession by any means necessary, violence is what that is alluding to, ending America as we know it, because they're saying it's largely most of what we heard there, and then also his wild tangent when it came to the George Floyd conversation. But so much of that centered around, oh, I'm concerned about the children. But you don't actually want to support the policies that would protect the kids in one of the most basic senses, which is their life, right? And then let's have all the discussions as well. But let's start with protecting their life. That makes sense to me. But it doesn't make sense to so many people because they have distorted the meaning of the Second Amendment to mean let's allow for as much carnage as possible for this weird, completely incorrect ideological stance when it comes to the Second Amendment. And so all of it is to distract from real conversations about real ways to improve people's lives. There's none of that going on within this part of the political right wing. Instead, it's this. A bunch of dishonest fluff and random stuff. And then that justifies secession. Now, Jason Whitlock likely would go, no, I'm not saying violence. But do you think those listening to Jason Whitlock on the largest cable news show's platform will take it that way? Absolutely not. Secession has a very specific connotation. Jason Whitlock knows that. So enraging. Make sure you're following me on Instagram, Luke Beasley Official.